Driverly.com, unlimited drama series.
The text message arrived at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, right as I was debugging a particularly nasty piece of code that had been haunting me for 3 days. My phone buzzed against my desk, and I almost ignored it. Almost. Eli, I'm in the hospital. Mental health crisis. This is all your fault. I can't take your emotional abuse anymore. Don't come looking for me. I stared at the screen, reading Mara's words 3 times before they sank in. My wife of 4 years, the woman who'd spent the last 6 months telling me she needed space to find herself, was apparently having a breakdown. And somehow, according to her twisted logic, it was my fault. The irony wasn't lost on me. For months, Mara had been pulling away, staying out late with her girlfriends, Fiona and Sophie, posting cryptic Instagram stories about toxic relationships and finding your authentic self. Every time I tried to talk to her about our marriage, she'd shut down or turn it around on me. "You're so controlling, Eli," she'd say, tossing her perfectly styled blonde hair. I need to breathe. Controlling? Right. Because asking your wife where she's been until 2 a.m. on a work night is apparently the height of emotional tyranny. But despite everything, despite the growing distance and the constant fights, I still loved her. Or maybe I loved the idea of who she used to be, before she became obsessed with social media and started hanging out with those vapid friends of hers who treated marriage like it was some kind of prison sentence. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door, my mind racing. Massachusetts General was only 20 minutes away if I hit the traffic right. On the way, I stopped at the flower shop on Newbury Street, the same place where I'd bought her roses for our first anniversary. The elderly woman behind the counter, Mrs. Chen, recognized me immediately. "For your beautiful wife?" she asked with a knowing smile. "Yeah," I said, picking out 24 red roses. "She's going through a tough time." That was an understatement. But Mrs. Chen didn't need to know that my marriage was apparently falling apart faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. The engagement ring was still in my car's glove compartment, the upgrade I'd been planning to surprise her with for our anniversary next month. A 2-carat diamond solitaire that had cost me 3 months' salary. Maybe this crisis, whatever it was, would be the wake-up call we needed. Maybe we could finally talk honestly about what was wrong between us. I parked at Mass General and walked through the sliding doors, roses in one hand, ring box in the other. The antiseptic smell hit me immediately, that distinctive hospital cocktail of disinfectant and despair. "I'm looking for my wife, Mara Parker," I told the receptionist at the psychiatric unit. "She was admitted today?" The woman, a tired-looking nurse in her 50s, typed something into her computer. She frowned, typed some more, then looked up at me with confusion. "I'm sorry, sir. We don't have anyone by that name admitted today. Are you sure she's here?" My stomach dropped. Check again. Mara Parker, Parker. She texted me that she was here for a mental health crisis. More typing, more frowning. "Sir, I've checked our system twice. No Mara Parker has been admitted to this hospital today, or any day this week." The roses suddenly felt heavy in my hand. Could she be registered under her maiden name? Mara Chamberlain? Another search, same result. Nothing. I walked back to my car in a daze, my mind spinning. If Mara wasn't at the hospital, where the hell was she? And why would she lie about something like that? Then I remembered. We both had Find My iPhone enabled on our accounts. It was something she'd insisted on a year ago, after claiming she was worried about my safety when I worked late. "Just in case something happens," she'd said. At the time, I thought it was sweet. Now I was beginning to wonder if she'd had other motives. I pulled up the app and searched for her phone. The little blue dot appeared immediately, pulsing steadily. But it wasn't at Mass General. It wasn't even in Boston. It was at the Ocean View Resort in Cape Cod, about 90 minutes south. My hands were shaking as I called my best friend Will. He picked up on the second ring. "Eli, what's wrong, man? You sound like hell." "I need your help," I said, explaining the situation as quickly as I could. Will had been a cop for 10 years, before starting his own security consulting business. If anyone would know what to do, it was him. "Jesus, Eli, that's really messed up. You want me to come with you?" "Yeah, and Will, bring your camera. I have a feeling I'm going to need evidence of whatever I find down there. Before we left, I made one more call to Mara's parents. Her father, Robert Chamberlain, was a successful CEO who'd never quite approved of me, but he'd always been fair. Her mother, Patricia, was old Boston money, the kind of woman who could trace her family back to the Mayflower and never let you forget it. Eli! Robert's voice was sharp with concern. Is everything all right? I explained about the text, the hospital, and the location tracking. There was a long silence on the other end. That's very unlike Mara, he said finally. Patricia and I will meet you at the resort. This needs to be resolved immediately. The drive to Cape Cod felt like the longest 90 minutes of my life. Will tried to make conversation, cracking jokes about GPS stalking and wayward wives, but I could barely focus. My mind kept cycling through possibilities, each one worse than the last. When we pulled into the Ocean View Resort's circular drive, I spotted the Chamberlains' black Mercedes, already parked near the entrance. Robert and Patricia were standing by the valet station, both looking grim and uncomfortable. Eli, Robert nodded as we approached. Have you heard from her? Nothing since the original text. I held up my phone, showing Mara's location. She's definitely here. Room 237, according to this. Patricia pressed her lips together in that way she did when she was deeply displeased. This is completely unacceptable behavior. We raised her better than this. The four of us walked through the resort's opulent lobby, past families in vacation clothes and couples sipping wine by the fireplace. It all looked so normal, so peaceful. I wondered how many of these people were living lies, how many were one text message away from having their entire world collapse. Room 237 was on the second floor, overlooking the ocean. I could hear voices inside. Mara's laugh, light and carefree in a way I hadn't heard in months, and a man's voice, deep and confident. Should we knock? Will asked quietly. Before I could answer, the door to the adjoining balcony opened, and there she was. Mara stepped outside wearing a white sundress I'd never seen before, her hair loose and flowing in the ocean breeze. She looked radiant, happier than she'd been in our entire house in months. And she wasn't alone. The man who followed her onto the balcony was everything I wasn't. Tall, muscular, with the kind of effortless confidence that comes from never having to worry about anything in your entire life. His arms were covered in tribal tattoos, and he moved like he owned the world. As we watched from the courtyard below, Mara turned to face him, stood on her tiptoes, and kissed him. Not a friendly peck, not an accidental moment. A deep, passionate kiss that spoke of intimacy and familiarity. Patricia gasped. Robert's face turned red. Will muttered something under his breath that I couldn't quite catch. But me? I just stood there, roses and ring still in my hands, watching my wife of 4 years kiss another man, while her parents and my best friend witnessed the complete destruction of my marriage. That's when I started laughing. My laughter wasn't the kind you hear at comedy shows or birthday parties. It was the bitter, hollow sound that comes from somewhere deep in your chest when the universe reveals just how thoroughly it's been screwing with you. Eli, Will said, putting a hand on my shoulder. Maybe we should... No. I shook my head, still staring up at the balcony, where my wife was now running her fingers through her lover's hair. I want to see this through. Robert Chamberlain had gone from red to purple. That's Trevor Beckett, he said through gritted teeth. He owns that chain of upscale gyms downtown. I know his father. Of course she was cheating with a gym owner. Of course it was someone who looked like he'd stepped off the cover of Men's Health magazine. The cosmic joke just kept getting better. How long do you think this has been going on? Patricia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Months, I said, pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. All those late nights with Fiona and Sophie, all those... girls' trips and networking events. She's been playing me this entire time. We took the elevator to the second floor, a silent quartet of rage and disappointment. I knocked on room 237 with more force than necessary. "Just a minute," Mara's voice called out, followed by frantic whispering and the sound of people scrambling around. When the door finally opened, Mara stood there in a hotel bathrobe, her hair hastily pulled back, trying to look surprised to see us. "Eli? Mom? Dad? What are you doing here?" Her acting was terrible. Always had been. "Cut the crap, Mara," I said, pushing past her into the room. Trevor was sitting on the bed, shirtless, trying to look casual and failing miserably. "Nice mental health crisis you're having here." Her face cycled through several expressions: surprise, anger, defiance, and finally, that manipulative sweetness she always used when she was caught red-handed. "Eli, baby, this isn't what it looks like." "I can explain." "Explain what?" I held up my phone, showing her location. "Explain how you're having a breakdown at Mass General while simultaneously making out with Captain CrossFit here?" Trevor stood up, puffing out his chest like some kind of rooster. "Hey man, watch your tone. Mara told me all about how you treat her." "Did she?" I turned to my wife, who was now looking genuinely panicked. "What exactly did you tell him, Mara? That I'm abusive? Controlling? Let me guess. I don't understand you. I don't support your dreams. I'm holding you back from your true potential?" "Eli, please." "No, I'm curious. Because the man she described to you doesn't sound like the guy who's been working 60-hour weeks to pay for your yoga classes and spa days. Doesn't sound like the guy who's been begging you to go to marriage counseling for the past year." Patricia stepped forward, her voice ice cold. "Mara Elizabeth Chamberlain, you will explain yourself this instant." My wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, looked around the room like a trapped animal. Trevor, realizing he was outnumbered and that this was way more complicated than he'd bargained for, started edging toward the door. "I think I should go," he mumbled. "Oh no," I said, blocking his path. "You're part of this now, Trevor. You're the other man. Own it. Look, I didn't know she was married when we met." "Bullshit." I held up my phone again, scrolling to Mara's Instagram. "She's got wedding photos all over her social media. You'd have to be blind to miss them." Trevor's face flushed. He looked at Mara, who was now sitting on the bed with her head in her hands. "You said you were separated," he said accusingly. "We are separated," Mara said weakly. "Emotionally. Emotionally separated." I repeated the phrase slowly, tasting each syllable. "Is that what we're calling adultery now?" Robert had been silent through this entire exchange, but now he stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades in corporate boardrooms. "Mara, your behavior is disgraceful. Not only have you betrayed your marriage vows, but you've lied to your family and manipulated this situation to make yourself the victim." "Dad, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." He turned to me, his expression softer than I'd ever seen it. "Eli, I owe you an apology. We all do. And I want you to know that Patricia and I will not be supporting Mara through this situation." That was Robert Chamberlain speak for, "You're on your own, kid." Mara's face went white. "Dad, you can't be serious." "I'm dead serious. Your trust fund is frozen as of right now. Your credit cards are canceled. And if you think you're coming home after this, you're mistaken." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Trevor," I said, turning to the muscle-bound moron who was still trying to sneak toward the door, "aren't you going to defend your girlfriend? Stand up for true love?" He looked at Mara, then at her parents, then at me. The calculation was written all over his face. Wealthy gym owner or disgraced cheater with no money and angry parents? "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said finally. "Mara and I are just friends. This whole thing got blown out of proportion." And there it was, the final betrayal. Mara looked at Trevor with complete devastation, realizing that her knight in shining armor was actually just another coward looking out for himself. "Friends?" she whispered. "Good friends," Trevor clarified, grabbing his shirt and heading for the door. "But nothing serious, nothing worth all this drama." He was gone before any of us could respond, leaving Mara sitting alone on the bed in a hotel bathrobe, abandoned by everyone. I set the roses on the dresser and placed the ring box next to them. "These were for you," I said quietly. "I was going to propose again. Upgrade your ring for our anniversary." Funny how things work out. Mara started crying then. Real tears. Not the crocodile tears she used when she wanted something. But I was done being moved by her pain. She'd made her choice. The divorce papers will be filed Monday morning, I told her. Don't contact me unless it's through lawyers. I walked toward the door, followed by Will and the Chamberlains. Just before I left, I turned back one last time. Oh, and Mara? Next time you fake a mental health crisis, maybe don't post Instagram stories from your romantic getaway. The timestamps are a real bitch. Her face went from devastation to horror as she realized her mistake. In her rush to document her perfect weekend with Trevor, she'd forgotten to turn off her location services. We left her there, alone in that hotel room, with 24 roses and a diamond ring she'd never wear, finally understanding the real cost of her choices. But this was just the beginning. The drive back to Boston was quiet for the first hour. Will kept glancing at me like he expected me to have a breakdown. Robert and Patricia.
I was drunk. I didn't know what I was doing.
Drunk? I have everything on video.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Followed in their Mercedes, and I just drove, my mind strangely clear for the first time in months. You okay, man? Will finally asked as we hit the city limits. Actually, yeah. I realized I meant it. I feel like I've been holding my breath for a year, and I can finally exhale. What are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? The old Eli would have gone home, gotten drunk, and felt sorry for himself. The old Eli would have taken Mara back when she inevitably came crawling home with apologies and promises to change. But the old Eli was gone, left behind in that hotel room with the roses and the ring. I'm going to destroy them both, I said calmly. Will raised an eyebrow. Legally, right? Completely legally, but thoroughly. My phone rang as we pulled into my driveway. Robert Chamberlain. Eli, Patricia and I would like to take you to dinner tomorrow night. We have some things to discuss. The next evening, I found myself at Loch Ober, one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants. The Chamberlains were already seated when I arrived, looking every inch the old money power couple they were. Eli, Patricia stood to hug me, which was unprecedented. How are you holding up? Better than expected, honestly. Robert got straight to business, which I appreciated. I want to offer you a position at Chamberlain Industries, Senior VP of Technology. It comes with a significant salary increase and stock options. I nearly choked on my wine. Robert, I appreciate the gesture, but it's not a gesture, it's business. You're brilliant at what you do, and I've been watching your work for years. This offer has nothing to do with Mara and everything to do with your qualifications. Plus, Patricia added with a small smile, it would absolutely infuriate our daughter to see you succeed while she's figuring herself out. I had to admire their style. Even their kindness came with a sharp edge. I'll think about it, I said. There's something else, Robert continued. I've hired a private investigator to look into Mr. Beckett's business practices. Call it due diligence for a potential investment. What he's found is interesting. He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were photos, financial records, and what looked like surveillance reports. Trevor's been running his gyms as more than just fitness centers, Robert explained. Steroid distribution, money laundering through fake personal training sessions, and he's been having affairs with at least 6 married clients. Their husbands might be very interested to know. This was better than Christmas morning. There's more, Patricia said. We've also been looking into Mara's friends. Fiona and Sophie have been posting quite extensively about their role in encouraging Mara's adventures, screenshots of their conversations, photos from their girls' nights that were actually cover stories. Everything documented. Why are you helping me? I asked. Robert's expression was grim. Because what Mara did was unconscionable. But more than that, she embarrassed our family. The Chamberlain name means something in this city, and she dragged it through the mud. We raised her to have values, Patricia added. Clearly, we failed somewhere along the way. This is our attempt to make amends. I spent the rest of the week planning. Will helped, approaching it like the military operation he'd learned in the Marines before becoming a cop. We mapped out Trevor's routine, identified his weaknesses, and prepared our first strike. Trevor's pride and joy was his cherry red Porsche 911, which he parked in the same spot outside his flagship gym every day. He'd posted probably 100 Instagram photos of that car, always with captions about hard work paying off and living the dream. On Friday night, Will and I paid it a visit. We didn't damage it, that would have been illegal. Instead, we got creative. A dozen cans of tuna fish emptied into the air conditioning system. Honey poured over the windshield and allowed to crystallize. And my personal favorite, a custom vinyl decal for the rear window that read, "I sleep with married women," in bright yellow letters. The next morning, I posted anonymously in several local Facebook groups about the interesting car parked outside Beckett Fitness, complete with photos. By noon, Trevor's Porsche was surrounded by curious onlookers and disapproving suburban moms. The fallout was immediate and beautiful. Trevor's social media exploded with angry comments from clients and their spouses. 3 women canceled their memberships publicly, posting detailed accounts of Trevor's unprofessional advances. But the best part was Mara's reaction. She called me screaming, "Eli, what did you do to Trevor's car?" "I have no idea what you're talking about," I said innocently. "I've been working all morning. Ask my new boss." "Your new boss?" "Oh, didn't I mention? Your father offered me a position at Chamberlain Industries, Senior VP. I start Monday." The silence on the other end was deafening. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious. Turns out your parents were pretty upset about your little performance at the resort. Something about family values and personal integrity. You know how old money gets about scandal." "Eli, please, we need to talk. This whole thing with Trevor was a mistake. I was confused. I was having a crisis. You were having an affair. It wasn't supposed to happen. You and I, we can work this out. We can go to counseling, we can—" "Mara," I cut her off, "I want you to listen very carefully. We are getting divorced. You are not welcome in my house. And if you contact me again for anything other than legal matters, I will file a restraining order." I hung up and immediately blocked her number. Will, who had been listening from my kitchen, raised his beer in salute. "Cold, man. Effective, but cold." "She made her choice," I said. "Now she gets to live with the consequences." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, I found a photo of Trevor's gym with a closed for inspection sign on the door and a message, "Phase 1 complete. RC." Robert Chamberlain was proving to be a very useful ally. But this was still just the beginning. Trevor and Mara had humiliated me publicly, destroyed my marriage, and turned my life upside down. A little car vandalism and a health inspection were just the opening moves. I had so much more planned. The Boston Charity Gala was the social event of the season. 500 of the city's most influential people gathered to raise money for children's hospitals, while networking and showing off their wealth. Mar had been looking forward to it for months, back when we were still married and she still had access to the Chamberlain family's social circle. Now, 3 weeks after the resort incident, she was persona non grata. But that didn't stop her from trying to crash the party. I arrived at the Four Seasons ballroom in a new tuxedo, courtesy of my Chamberlain Industries salary, with Patricia as my date. Robert thought it would be appropriate for me to escort his wife while he handled some last-minute business calls. What he really meant was that it would send a clear message about which side of the divorce the family was supporting. "You look handsome, dear," Patricia said as we walked through the entrance. "Much more relaxed than the last time I saw you." She was right. The past 3 weeks had been the best of my life in months. My new job was challenging and rewarding. Trevor's gym empire was crumbling under city inspections and client defections, and Mara was learning what life was like without her family's money and connections. "Eli!" a familiar voice called out across the ballroom. I turned to see Fiona approaching, looking uncomfortable in a dress that was trying too hard to be elegant. Sophie trailed behind her, both of them clearly out of their element at an event this upscale. "I didn't expect to see you here," Fiona said, her tone carefully neutral. "Patricia needed an escort," I replied smoothly. "You remember Mrs. Chamberlain." Patricia smiled with the kind of polite coldness that old money had perfected over generations. "Fiona, Sophie, how unexpected to see you here." The implication was clear. They didn't belong here, and everyone knew it. "We're here with Mara," Sophie said defensively. "She's having a really hard time with everything that's happened." "I'm sure she is," Patricia replied. "Poor choices often have unpleasant consequences." Before anyone could respond, there was a commotion near the entrance. Mara had arrived, wearing a dress I'd never seen before, probably borrowed or bought on credit she couldn't afford. She looked around the ballroom like she was searching for friendly faces and finding none. "Excuse me," I told Patricia. "I need to handle something." I approached the event's organizer, a society matron named Mrs. Wellington, who had known the Chamberlains for decades. "Eli, dear," she greeted me warmly, "how lovely that you could join us tonight." "Mrs. Wellington, I wanted to give you a heads up. My soon-to-be ex-wife just arrived, and she wasn't invited. Given the circumstances of our separation, I thought you should know she might cause a scene." Mrs. Wellington's eyes sharpened. She'd survived 50 years of Boston high society by being able to smell drama from across a ballroom. "Thank you for the warning, dear. We'll keep an eye on the situation." What happened next was a masterclass in social warfare. Word spread through the ballroom like wildfire. Whispered conversations, meaningful glances, the gradual formation of an invisible barrier around Mara and her friends. No one was outright rude, but suddenly every conversation they tried to join became exclusive. Every group they approached found reasons to move elsewhere. I watched from across the room as Mara's confidence crumbled. This was her world, or had been, and now she was being systematically excluded from it. That's when she made her mistake. Desperate to regain some social footing, Mara approached the podium where the evening's speakers were scheduled to address the crowd. She whispered something to the event coordinator, probably claiming she had a message from her father or some other lie. Before anyone could stop her, she was at the microphone. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice shaky but determined. "I know many of you have heard stories about my personal life recently, and I wanted to set the record straight." The ballroom went dead silent. This was either going to be the most spectacular apology in Boston social history or the most spectacular meltdown. Based on everything I knew about Mara, I was betting on the latter. My husband, Eli Parker, has been spreading lies about me to turn my family and friends against me. The truth is, he's been emotionally abusive for years, controlling my every move, isolating me from the people I love. Oh, she was going with the victim narrative. Bold choice. I finally found the courage to leave him, and instead of respecting my decision, he's launched a campaign of harassment and revenge. He's turned my own parents against me, cost my friend his business, and now he's trying to destroy my reputation in this community. I had to admire her commitment to the lie. If I didn't know better, I might have believed her myself. So, I want everyone here to know the truth about Eli Parker. He's not the nice, quiet man you think he is. He's vindictive, manipulative, and he's standing right behind you, I said, walking up to join her at the podium. Mara spun around, her face going white, as she realized she'd been caught red-handed, slandering me in front of 500 witnesses. I gently took the microphone from her unresisting hands. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this interruption. For those who don't know me, I'm Eli Parker, and yes, I'm going through a divorce from Mara Chamberlain Parker." I paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Everyone was riveted. 3 weeks ago, my wife sent me a text saying she was in the hospital having a mental health crisis. Naturally, I rushed to her side with flowers and a ring, ready to support her through whatever she was facing. Another pause. The ballroom was so quiet you could hear champagne bubbles popping. Instead, I found her at a Cape Cod resort with her lover, a gentleman named Trevor Beckett. Her parents were with me when we discovered them together. "We have photos." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mar looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Now, I understand that marriages end. People fall out of love, they grow apart, they make mistakes. But what I can't understand is standing in front of all of you and claiming to be the victim when she's the one who chose to lie, cheat, and manipulate everyone around her. I handed the microphone back to the event coordinator and turned to Mara. "You want to play the victim? Fine. But do it somewhere else. These people deserve better than your lies." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, Robert Chamberlain started clapping. Patricia joined him. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was applauding, not for Mara, but for me. Mara, Fiona, and Sophie fled the ballroom like their hair was on fire. But I wasn't done yet. The next morning, I received a call from Will. "You need to see this," he said. "Trevor just posted something on Instagram that you're going to love." I pulled up Trevor's account to find a long, rambling post about crazy women and drama he didn't sign up for. He'd thrown Mara completely under the bus, claiming she'd lied about being separated and dragged him into her marital problems. The post had dozens of comments, mostly from women sharing their own stories about Trevor's behavior. It was a beautiful thing to watch. But the real cherry on top came that afternoon, when I received a package at my office. Inside was a flash drive with a note from Robert. Security footage from the resort. Thought you might find it useful. RC. The footage showed Mara and Trevor's entire weekend getaway, checking in together, holding hands by the pool, the balcony kiss that had started this whole thing. Time-stamped and crystal clear. I uploaded it to a private YouTube channel and sent the link to Mara with a simple message. "In case you want to remember the good times, try explaining this to your next boyfriend." Her response came within minutes. "You bastard. I'll destroy you for this." I laughed out loud in my office. She still didn't get it. She was already destroyed. I was just making sure everyone else knew it too.